coming. It's great to have new faces here as we've opened this up to the public. And we're doing it in this beautiful gallery. So I'm thanking Jason and Michelle for providing this space to curate this show. So this is part of this series of 12 conversations that I started in my studio in November 2015. This is the 10th one. We have 2 more to go after Jamal and Kim. And they were only in my studio up until today, and they were only for artists and their families and creatives. But we didn't invite curators and museum directors and so on for the purpose of creating this intimate, safe space for artists to really speak about their truths, their concerns, their journey, without curating or preparing to be on. I just wanted them to be relaxed and to speak their truths amongst each other, to bond and inspire each other. So today, I'm very happy to have Kimberly Morris and Jamal Hostef. So Kimberly Morris was born in West Los Angeles, California, and grew up in Merck Park. Her rich Creole heritage has been a major influence on her work. Her great-grandmother was Christine Collins, a Creole photographer based in New Orleans in the late 19th. Collins was one of the 101 African-American women who identified themselves as photographers in the late 1920 U.S. Census. Kimberly critiques self-identity, ideas of beauty, popular culture and race in America in her videos, sculptures, her photographs, and paintings. Working with materials such as hair, plaster, resin, and silicone, she struggles with the constraining expectations society imposes on women of color. She writes, through the lens of beauty, I examine my position in the diaspora, pressures of fitting into what the majority culture defines as normal, neater hair, and constricted body typecasting dictate my daily routine. In addition to her studio practice, Kimberly curated the 2015 Glam Flat Greater Los Angeles Masters of Fine Art Invitational at the California State University, Long Beach. She received her BA in Studio Arts and MA from California State University, Northridge, and her MFA from California State University, Long Beach in sculpture. Kimberly will have work at group show Biolithography, Currency Exchange at the California Lutheran University, late fall of 2017. So help me in welcoming Kim Morris.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming out. So usually when I talk about myself and my practice, I start with my family and my heritage, since it plays such a big role on who I am and what I may work about. Let's get into it. So I usually start with this image. This is a map of New Orleans. I grew up seeing this map every day. At every Creole household that I went to, family or friends, they all have this map framed on the wall here in Los Angeles. There was a big migration. I would say in the early 40s of Creoles coming from New Orleans here to California, particularly the Los Angeles and Merck Park area, for work. So my grandparents got married when they were 17 and 18 and moved here to Los Angeles on my mother's side. And my dad's father joined the military when he was 17. He lied about his age, and he also lied about his race. He just omitted it so that he could serve in the Navy. He ended up in the Aleutian Islands during World War II, and then came on down to Southern California with my grandmother. So I'm going to start with some photographs on my mother's side. So this is my 3 times great-grandfather. He is a colored man. And so this idea of seeing people looking one way and knowing what their identity is, for me, played a big role on what race is. And for me, at an early age, I really understood that it really is a construct, and that your outward appearance really doesn't define what race is, but it is a very real thing, and it affects economy, and it really is a tool used to divide and conquer and to propel economic gains. And so I understood this at a really, really young age because of seeing my family all look one way and appear to be something else to others. So just a little history about him. He served in the 74th Regiment of the U.S. Colored Civil War Troops in New Orleans, and he was born in 1827 and he died in 1905. And this is my aunt that was mentioned in my bio. She documented African-American life in New Orleans between 1920 and 1949. She learned her trade as a photographer by passing, which is what they call passe-blanc in New Orleans. She was an apprentice to a white photographer. He had no idea that she was a woman of color. And once she learned her trade, she opened her own studio. My aunt is actually my cousin. She's a professor at Occidental College. She does a lot of research about my aunt, Florestine. She died when I was about 4 years old. I think she was like 90-something when she passed away. But she was really influential in my life because her work was actually what I thought were family portraits growing up. I never knew how important she was until I was about a teenager and there was an exhibition on her at Occidental. And to see my family photos as a kid, I remember walking, I think I might have been like 10 years old, and I was walking with my grandmother, who this is actually my grandmother. And I was walking with her in the museum, and I remember telling her, I was like, Granny, you're old, you're in a museum. And, and to me, still even at that time, it didn't really resonate to me what was going on until later on in life that I became an artist myself. She also did ceramics and painting. And my grandmother here that's photographed, she's the one who started teaching me to paint when I was about 8. And so this is something that was fostered my whole life, and I feel very fortunate that I had a family that fostered it, especially being African American, because those tend to be things that your family like stirs you away from because they're like, how are you going to make money? So this is another one of her works. This is my grandmother's mother. This is my great-grandmother. She photographed her. This was in, I think, the 1930s, this photograph of hers. And this is my dad's mother. I never met her. She passed the year I was born, but I've always had a connection with this woman that I've never met because they made sure that they told me about her. My middle name is actually her first name, Eleanor. And she left me all of her jewelry. That was the last thing they told her, that I was going to be born. So I've cherished this woman through her objects my whole life. And sometimes they surface in my work here and there. And then this is a photograph of my brother, father, and my mother. So this is what my family looks like. So growing up, I was always told what I was, or questioned by people about what I was. I didn't understand, I would say, until I was about 9 or 10, what being black was, that it was even a thing, that there was a term for it. I went to school in Playa del Rey until I was in the 3rd grade. It was very first school. It was like a babysitter's club type school where you have a kid from like every nationality there. And so I kind of lived in this fantasy world that everybody just gets along and this is how life is. And then my brother graduated from the school in 6th grade, and I left at the 3rd grade because my mother was super protective and was like terrified for me to ride a school bus by myself. So she put me in a Catholic school in Inglewood, St. Anselm. And I was in a culture shock for the first time because I was at school that was 100% black. That had never happened to me before in my life. And my experience there with my people for the first time alone was very interesting. I was immediately confronted with questions. What are you? Where are you from? Who's white? One of your parents is white. And it was the first time I had heard the term good hair. I was in the 4th grade, so I was about 10 years old. And I didn't know what these questions were, because growing up Creole, you're black, but it's a subculture. And Creoles tend to stick together because of you not being black enough for the black folks and not being white enough for the white folks. And so, it was an interesting experience for me. I kind of regressed for a while. I learned to code switch and put on personalities when I was at school and when I was at home. My brother was there with me for 2 weeks, and then they found another school to send him to, and they sent him there, and I was just kind of like left there by myself. I remember they used to cut my hair off when I was sitting in class sometimes. But it was like this rite of passage that I had to go through. It was like a hazing that they put me through. And by the end, I obviously had been friends with everyone by the time I left in junior high school, 8th grade, and went on to high school. It was definitely an experience that shaped my perception of my own people. And obviously during this time, I'm also starting to have experiences with the outside world, with the white world, which also shaped my experiences with like what humanity is and what they do. So it left me in a strange place. So fast forward through high school, I went to an all-girl high school in Inglewood, went to St. Mary's. It was 50-50 black and Hispanic. High school was a pretty decent experience. Most of the girls that I went to school with, it was a college prep school, so they all had their tracks of what they wanted to do. Everybody went to college, that kind of thing. So there wasn't too much of that racial tension that was happening. So fast forward to, went to undergrad at Cal State Northridge, and this work starts at my senior year. This was the work I used to get into my MA program. And so at this time, I had become really interested in body modification. And I've always been kind of heavy as an adult, and it really affected, obviously, my self-esteem and like where I find myself fitting in, me being a black woman that's voluptuous, like how does this affect my psyche, where is my place in society? So I started researching body modifications, breast implants, breast lifts, tummy tucks. And at the time, I didn't have a model. So I actually started sculpting for these paintings, these little dolls. And I'll show you the next one. And here are the dolls. So I started sculpting these little dolls. I would light them and put in all this great detail, like coloring. They're all made out of nylon. So I would make all of these out of things that women use, or people in general use, to perfect themselves or change themselves or hide something about themselves. So they're all made of nylon. All of the coloring is all my makeup. All of the stitching, I would research the stitching, so I'd be watching YouTube videos and then retraining like myself to do it on these dolls. And then at this point in time, my mentor was like, you know, Kim, I think that these paintings are great, but the fact that you're spending this much time giving this love and attention to these sculptures, like, I think you might need to go next door to the sculpture department. So that's what I did, and I'll give you one more example. And then from those dolls, I like constructed this fat suit. And I had people wear it like during my crit, and they could wear it as long as they want to. They could wear it until they got uncomfortable, or they could sit through being uncomfortable in it to try to maybe give the experience of what it's like. So this was all to get into my MA program. And then once I was in the program, I started studying like the histories of jewelry boxes of the ballerinas, and so then I brought the doll down to size. And they work, they spin, they sing, so I constructed all these boxes. And then I got interested in boxes for a while, so there was like this jacket box, and this piece right here was a transitional piece for me because this was the first time I had cast myself. So the finger that's on the side of the box was my finger. It was the first time I started to use my body in my work. And for a while, I think I used beauty and weight as a way to talk about myself because I was too afraid to talk about race at the time. it was uncomfortable for me. But I liked how these works made the viewer uncomfortable, because I felt as though it conveyed what it's like to be in my shoes and to be in many people's shoes that are of color, that there's this constant uncomfortability that you just deal with. It's so constant that it becomes normal. It's just a way of life. And so this was the next one. This is my eye and my nose and lip cast. Still teetering on dealing with the body modification. And then here's a detail. And then after that, I just stopped with the boxes and just started doing these like experimental. So same thing. These are all made out of plaster, but all of the coloring is my foundation, my nail polish, my lip gloss, and I spray it down and seal it all in. And then here's another. So then that led me down this road, or this idea of bodies being fixtures in history, and basically just being seen or utilized and not really heard. So I got interested in Victorian furniture for a while and started researching that. And when I was doing my research, I discovered that some really strange things about the Victorian era. For example, just anecdotal, tablecloths came into play because during the Victorian era, the legs of tables were modeled after women's legs. And apparently, at some time in history, there was a lot of masturbation going on the legs of tables. And so they made tablecloths to cover them up. Yeah. So I started to think about this idea of like the sexualized body and black bodies being sexualized, but also being seen as like fixtures and being used for like utilitarian purposes. And so I got a bunch of my nylons and I sewed them together and reupholstered this chair and modeled it, after a body, my body. And then, so side view. And like all of the coloring is the same thing. It's hand sewn, but it's all my makeup. And then I made a table that actually sits in my parents' house now. And then I replaced the lion claw with my own hands. Then I stepped away from the furniture and I went back to these smaller objects. And so this is like a really literal piece about me forcing myself into a frame that I don't fit into. Over the years, I started to realize that there's this like performative element to my work, especially more recently, like when you look back on the things that you've done. I questioned a lot when I was in grad school, so why don't you do performances? Why don't you do performances? But then I realized I do performances, just nobody's there when I'm doing it. You see the relics, right? Nobody sees me doing them. But you see the relics of these performances. And there's like, for this piece in particular, I had gotten, so I use alginate when I cast myself a lot, just because it's cheap for one. But I had gotten the timing down on how long to hold my breath for certain things. So there's also this like torture element that happens occasionally in the work, like this self-torture. So like this piece in particular, I had to time how long to hold my breath so that I could have my mouth open and my whole nose crammed inside of this frame, and I decided like not to paint it. What does Kim look like if she's Snow White? Like if she's stark white? Like this idea, I think that for a long time I felt like I would never be accepted because I'm not white into society. So I explored that. I used all my makeup again for this piece. And then this was another transitional piece for me. This piece is called Cultural Assets. And it's 7 by 7 by 7. And it's on a white wall. A bottom wall as narrow as this when I installed it. And it was kind of to resemble a door knocker. And so I was revisiting that utilitarian thing about the black body again. And this was the work that I left my MA program with. And I made up a series of these little frames using colors of precious metal to add value. So I started to intertwine the idea of modifying body and race and value on that and what that means. And how we fetishize certain parts of our body and modify certain parts of our body, but they tend to be the features that racially identify us. So yeah, I've got some here. So this was called pedigree. And this one is called manufacture. Plentiful. And titillate. This was the first time that I had used something below my neck down. And it was scary for me to do because I'm like exposing myself for the first time, and I went through that young artist, like, where are my parents thing? Do I tell them, you know, my parents are both school teachers and they have always been supportive, but there's always been a slight backhandedness to the support just because of the fear of me finding employment and being able to support myself. And so I've always teetered on allowing them into my life, but how much do I want them to know? Are they going to judge me about this work? Are they going to understand this work? So this piece, when I installed it, I just told my parents, hey, I have this show, just come. And they came, and my parents were funny. They didn't get it, and it took my dad about 2 hours to figure out what it was. And he's watching, for them, seeing other people like my work is what solidified me to them. And so my dad's like watching people, and he's standing there, and he's listening to what they're saying, and then he has this thing now where he likes to go to, when he does come to openings, he likes to talk to people about me like he doesn't know me, to find out like what they're gonna say about the work. And then all of a sudden, it hit him, and he comes and he stands next to me, and he wouldn't look me in the face, and he's side by side, shoulder to shoulder, and he's like, so, is that your boob? And I was like, yep. Then he goes, all right, I think I can deal with this. And then, so with that work displayed on the wall, I'll show you a whole installation shot, was this vanity table that I had made using my hands and my feet, which kind of made a room. And also on the wall was this piece, and this was the first time that I had embedded the black body in the white wall, in the white space. And this is what the whole installation looked like. So that little mouth is on this wall here, and it kind of was meant to set up the room. So now I'm out of my MA program, and I'm like out of the world, and I'm trying to figure it out, and can't find a job, and me not having an MFA is like putting up, that F is like totally blocking me from doing what I want to do, and I don't have the space to make work, so I'm making work in my bedroom, and at the time, I think toddlers and tiaras was like a big thing in the media. And so I started seeing these images of these over-sexualized little girls. And so I started thinking about like, what does that mean in Black culture? How often this is happening with Black girls unintentionally? And you have a majority white women doing this to their children purposely. And I'm watching these shows and I'm trying to figure out like, how much do these little girls really want to participate in this, and how much is their parents doing this to them? And so this was kind of my piece that was a commentary on that while I'm like out trying to figure out what work I want to make now that I'm out. And then from there, I made this piece, and this is vibrance in my hand, serving myself to society in a platter that's typically used in a high-end restaurant. And we know who usually goes to high-end restaurants at this particular time period where this trait has come from. So I thought a lot about that, and then revisited being seen as a fixture or not there, and I did another piece in the wall. And so this work I used to apply to my grad program at Long Beach. And they liked me enough. And, and so that's where I found myself for 3 years. And this was one of the first works that I made there. It's called Regurgitate. And so this is a cast of myself, my mouth, and there's blonde hair coming from the back of my throat out onto the floor. And it goes all the way down to here, it drags all the way out. And I used nail polish, spray paint, and resin, and human hair. And then this is the next piece. And so I found myself in grad school again, and I was like, okay, you're comfortable casting, you've done this before, you're good at it. I gave myself a rule that I couldn't cast anymore for like a year. And I didn't know what to do now that I had like put these parameters on myself. And I started thinking about what are the other ways to represent me, and what other ways other than skin am I racially identified to the world. So I started reflecting on some of my childhood experiences and thinking about how if my hair is curly, how I'm perceived to people, versus if I straighten my hair, how I'm perceived to people. And I started thinking about how if I go to a job interview, I genuinely, seriously sit down in a chair and think about, okay, should I straighten my hair for this job interview? Is it going to be to my advantage or to my disadvantage to teeter on not being identifiable to these people? Or is it to my advantage to be identifiable to these people? And so from there, I made this work. So this work is just a literal copy of what happens when you have extensions put in your hair. But there's also this beautiful aesthetic to the process. You know, this braid, this intricate braiding, and then the sewing of this hair. And if it's human hair, that this once belonged to someone else. And the irony that this hair, to be perceived as white, is actually coming from Indian women, another brown-skinned person in society that is also disenfranchised. And what are the economic ramifications of that? Because now you have race being used once again as commodity. And then from there, I started to make another one. And as I'm braiding and braiding and braiding and sewing it together, it's like, why don't I just wear this? Why don't I just wear the weave? Why don't I just wear the braid? Why don't I just wear what you braid up to hide on my face? And so this is called Masquerade. And paired next to it is my pressing comb that I use, because I'm old school with it still. So for the of you that don't know, this is a hot comb that you typically place on a burner or in an oven, and you heat it up and you use it to straighten your hair. This is what most black women use until the hot iron, the flat irons that they have now got hot enough to straighten their hair. And so this is a lock of my hair laying inside of the hot comb paired next to the photo of myself wearing the braid. And then next I did this little photo project where, because I'm super obsessed with makeup, I was like, you know what? Let me see, what do I look like if I'm white? And I sat down, it took me like 3 hours. And I sat down and I painted half of myself and I put in a blue contact. And then I actually sent the photo out and had them printed on contact mirrors and passed them out. So there's like this, I'm looking at myself in the reflection of the mirror when it's open, but then there's this other identity on the back side. So it's again that idea of like a masquerade that's going on. And then for my thesis work, I was still making these braids, but then decided to do basically another performance piece. And I had one of my friends that was in grad school with me, who was also a hairstylist, braid this braid into my hair and then bind me in it. So after it was braided and formed into my own hair, it wrapped me and bound me. And the experience itself for me was probably one of the most uncomfortable things that I've done in my work in terms of the torture element that's involved sometimes, because it was hot and it was itchy, because I'm like baking under this thing and it's itchy, I can't move, I can barely breathe, and I started having this anxiety. And then I started having these memories while I'm making this piece of the anxiety attacks I would have as a child when I would have to get my hair combed. And they still happen to me sometimes. But that was the first time that I realized like what that anxiety was. Because sometimes when I'm straightening my hair or trying something new that I've like never ventured on before with my mane, I would start to have that same feeling that I would have as a child, and it would just feel like needles all over. I'd start sweating because I grew up in a house where my mother did not know what to do with my hair. She's on the fairer end of things. My dad definitely was not about to try. My dad's side of the family, they're from Louisiana as well, but they have Haitian descent. And so they have more typical African-American hair. And so in my household, there was this battle of the good hair, bad hair that went on between my aunt and my mother. And my aunt would comb my hair and talk shit about my mom the entire time she combed my hair. And it was like, she don't know what she's doing. And like she's putting like all this grease in my hair, but my hair's not quite like her, so it's not really working out. And I'm sitting here listening to this woman like talk bad about my mom, and I'm like, but I'm part of my mom, so are you talking bad about me? But then there's this, you don't dare in a black household talk back to your elders, so like I can't say anything, and I'm just sitting here, and like I feel this anxiety like welling up. And then when my mom does my hair, it's like, I don't know what to do. Because my hair was straight for till I was about 5, and the texture changed. And she's like, the whole time, I thought your hair was going to be like mine. I don't know what's going on. Then the kitty perm started. And like, so it's like the whole thing. And my dad, whenever I was with him, I mean, my parents are still married. Whenever I was left alone with him and he was to do my hair, he'd be like, just put on a hat on. He'd be like, let's just put a hat on. It'll be all right, baby, let's go. Right? So there was always this issue centered around, and I remember I would let my hair go so long sometimes in the summertime when I was at my grandmother's, and I would have like dreadlocks in the back of my hair, and she'd like have to cut them out. And so this work, I also install the actual braid when I show the photograph. So this work is about those memories that I have. It's called Individuals, based on the name of the individual braids, but also that this work is about this individual. And then I made this piece, which is 30 feet long. It's all human hair. And it's hair from Indonesia, but I picked this hair because it's closest to my own hair. And it's also a hair that is somewhat racially unidentifiable when it's not attached to an individual. And the hair in the center, you can see it a little better here, it's the only piece that's colored. It's black and it's got these red tips. And so on both ends, it's surrounded by this racially identifiable hair, but then I started thinking about what happens if this unracially identifiable hair is on black girl with red hair, tips at the end, and what are the connotations behind that? And if it's on a white girl with the same color, what are the connotations that are perceived behind that? So the piece is called What's Yours Is Mine. I always get it right. What's yours is mine, what's real is not. no, what's mine is yours, what's yours is not. And it's basically about this idea that if I have a weave or extensions, I paid for it, so it's mine. But it's not, because it also belongs to some other individual out here in the world. And I like to toy with these ideas of perception, obviously. And I've always found it fascinating that if a brown-skinned, a dark-skinned woman has colored hair, she's usually perceived as ghetto or less than. And if a young white woman has the same hairstyle, she's perceived as edgy. And that's always bothered me. And I've never really understood why it is that way. Why is it that if I want to be edgy, or someone I know that's darker skinned than me wants to be edgy, automatically I'm like from a lower socioeconomic status, just period. And so that's the root of this work. Also, it's layered in with these ideas of minimalism, because I really like minimalist art aesthetically. I'm not about all this dogma and stuff, but I like the way that it looks, and so I also thought it was interesting for me as a Black woman to insert myself into a white dominant ideal, and what does that do to those ideas. And so this next piece is where the piece behind you was built off of. It's called Slay. And it's, if I remember correctly, it's a 90-foot trail of hair. And it's all knotted, and I hand knotted all of it and hand braided all of it. And then at the very end, there's a detail of it. You see it? At the very end, there's just like one silky robe. And it's, again, reminiscent of the process of detangling the mane and what you go through to achieve these things. And also thinking about the ideas that at what point do you do this because it's, which is why I call it slay. At one point do you do this because this is just cultural fashion now. Because maybe I just want my hair straight today because that's the mood I'm in. Or at what point are you doing this because you feel like you have to do this as a survival mechanism? And is our culture still in a place where Black women do this as a survival mechanism? Have they lost where it comes from? Is it so ingrained in culture that they don't realize that this is why you do this? Or is it now because, yeah, I'm aware of that, but you know what, it looks good, it's trendy, and I'm just into it today. So I like to play with these, ideas, these controversial, non-controversial things. Maybe it's just because it looks good, or maybe it's because of these other deep-seated issues that I have with self, and that's why I participate in these things. And to me, that's where things start to get interesting. So here's an installed shot of the exhibition that I did for my piece of show right now. And at the very end is a video that I'm going to play for you that I had projected on the wall, which I believe is behind you all here. So this video is like me doing what it takes to get the breeze to blow through. So the piece was called Hot, Wet, Burn. And when it was projected, there was a surround sound speaker behind you, and you were in this big empty space. So it was a really visceral experience where you could hear the crackling and burning and the comb ripping through my hair. And again, it makes you realize that there's a torture element involved. Because straightening your hair is a painful thing. You burn yourself sometimes, you're snatching through the curls, the heat from the blow dryer, not to mention that it like takes half your darn day to do. And so that's where I'm gonna end things. I decided not to put a photo of that piece since it's here, and you guys can ask me questions about it if you want to.
Yeah.
And then we're going to take a quick little break so that Jamal can set up. It'll be good because there's a lot of similarities between he and I's work, so this conversation was